You're listening to Innovators, the podcast from Harris Search Associates, where we speak with global leaders in education, research, engineering, and the health sciences, and ask them to share lessons learned as they continue to advance the frontiers of innovation and discovery. Today's podcast will be led by Rick Skinner, Senior Consultant.
It's worth noting, a phrase I'll use a few more times today, that 3 of the 4 most populous states in America today, California, Florida, and Texas, were Spanish and/or Mexican territories until 1848, when American troops invaded Mexico, seized the capital, Mexico City, and then wrestled by means of a treaty much of what we now know as the southwestern and western United States. Indeed, of the 11 declarations of war made by the United States, 8 were for the First and Second World Wars. 1 was the original one against Great Britain, Spain in 1896, and Mexico in 1846. Only Spain and Mexico ceded land to the United States. Hispanic and Latinx Americans have been part of American history since the earliest European presence in North America and the Western Hemisphere. So it's worth noting that Hispanics, Latinx make up the largest minority ethnic group in America at over 17%. But the terms Hispanic and Latinx simplify a complicated reality made up of persons whose native countries are Mexico, Puerto Rico, Cuba, El Salvador, the Dominican Republic, Guatemala, Ecuador, and Peru. These persons are nearly 20% of the overall labor market in the United States. And by 2025, they will make up 1 of every 2 new workers entering the American workforce. Every month, 66,000 will turn 18. There are then a distinctive history, a significant present, and an intriguing future associated with Hispanics in America. The history is at once similar to the experience of other population groups, but also different in very important ways. The present is tied up with a highly combustible issue of immigration, and the future, both near and farther out on the demographic horizon, is of genuine importance for the United States. For all these reasons and more, we sought out Raquel Tamez to help us understand better the stakes involved in the evolution and development of Hispanic and Latinx Americans, especially with respect to the professionals needed in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, the STEM fields. Ms. Tamez is the Chief Executive Officer of the Society of Hispanics in Professional Engineering, also known as SHPE, an 11,000-member organization with 250 chapters nationwide. She began her career as a trial attorney for the U.S. Department of Labor, and then became corporate counsel for Mary Kay Incorporated, general counsel for the nonprofit organization SourceAmerica, deputy general counsel for the international IT firm CSC. The child of Mexican immigrant parents, Ms. Tamez earned her undergraduate degree at the University of Texas and her law degree from St. Mary's. Welcome to Innovators, Ms. Tamez.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
For the moment, let's accept that population demographics and all the trends that are associated with them are destined. That is, whatever direction those trends are taking and whatever they'll be in the future, they're going to continue along the path they're on now. So if you apply that to Hispanic Americans and trends in their numbers in the population, their educational attainment, employment, representation in the professions and STEM fields, what will America look like for Hispanic Americans in terms of careers in medicine, engineering, science, and the other STEM fields? Is there reason to be optimistic, or will those trend lines need to bend?
Well, first of all, I will say that I am not a subject matter expert. I've been in my role at SHPE for 2 years. I'd like to think I'm a fast study. I'm most definitely an advocate for the organization. And to answer your questions directly, there is cause for optimism, but those arcs will need to be bent. The future is bright. I'm cautiously optimistic that the future is bright for Hispanics. But let me share why. I'll provide some background context.
Sure, please.
The majority of STEM workers in the US are white at 69%, followed by Asians at 13%, Blacks at 9%, and Hispanics at 7%. And compared with their shares in the overall workforce, whites and Asians are overrepresented, whereas Blacks and Hispanics are underrepresented in the STEM workforce as a whole. And that's based on some research from the Pew Research Center. So Hispanics are currently underrepresented in STEM compared to the overall workforce population. But like I mentioned, the STEM workplace of the future has exciting possibilities for Hispanics. And at SHPE, we are working to make that future even brighter.
Is there a reason, if I could just interrupt on that note,
Sure.
Is there a reason in recent years to suggest that those trend lines are bending in any way? Or is it the case that the trends, whether they go up or they go down, that's still out in the future? Or are you already seeing some bending of those arcs?
I'd like to think we're seeing some bending in those arcs, mainly because for Hispanics anyway, we're seeing an increase in high school graduation.
Excellent.
Where in 2006, the dropout rate was 21%, and in 2017, it dropped to 8.2%.
Dramatic improvement.
Good. Yeah, that's a dramatic improvement. That's good news. That's positive. Same thing with enrollments and degree completion. So we see Hispanics entering college and university at higher numbers and entering STEM studies, and in particular engineering studies, at higher levels. So that's also positive. But there's still a lot of work that has to be done, a lot of heavy lifting because of the current underrepresented numbers of Hispanics and Blacks in STEM. But we're encouraged by the positive trends. We definitely need the current arcs to be much, much steeper, for the slope to be an order of magnitude greater than it is now because of the population projections. But Hispanics are poised to significantly bridge the need for more STEM professionals. Hispanics can be the answer and the solution to the current STEM demands and the current STEM gap.
Would I be correct in saying that as of now, the only population group within the United States that can be defined by ethnicity is growing, one that is growing, is the Hispanic? Am I correct?
Well, I'm not an expert, but I would tend to agree with you. You know, Hispanics are going to be, they are, in fact, now the majority minority. And so there is that business imperative on the part of corporate America and agencies and government and state, you know, federal government, state government, as well as other organizations. It's not just, hey, let's do the right thing and, you know, go and diversify and make our workplaces more inclusive. There's a business imperative for diversifying and including Hispanics across the board.
Are you at a point now where the constraints on Hispanic Americans, the constraints that in some way hinder them from pursuing careers in STEM, what are the major ones, and which of them can somehow be affected by the kinds of professional standards that are usually set by professional associations? Is there any reason to think that those standards could be made to accommodate more of a Hispanic American population?
So I think there's an opportunity there for sure. I sit on the board of SES, which is the CEOs of the Science and Engineering Professional Societies. I'm 1 year into my membership there and 1 year into sitting as a board member. And there's definitely opportunity to make those professional societies more diverse and inclusive, and really taking a hard look at those standards and certifications. But you mentioned primary constraints, and I'll tackle that, your question, in two parts. Mainly, what are the primary constraints for students, and what are the primary constraints for professionals? With respect to students, it's first and foremost awareness and access. In many instances, Hispanic parents and families are not aware of the many possibilities and opportunities in STEM. In some instances, for first-generation families, for example, they might know that STEM, they may have heard of STEM, they understand that it's important, but they may not necessarily know all of the different opportunities and possibilities there.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's access. It's how do you get to STEM studies, jobs, careers.
Mm-hmm.
So SHPE is, we address those two main barriers, awareness and access, through one of our cornerstone programs called Noche de Ciencias.
Mm-hmm.
It's workshops that happen across the United States in conjunction with our student chapters, our professional chapters, and local teachers, administrators, and civic leaders. And
Mm-hmm.
we provide information to entire families and their children, not just high school students or college students, but middle school and younger. And we provide them with information on what STEM is, what engineering is. We have hands-on activities, and then we also provide information on how to access school resources. How do you apply to university? How do you apply and gain financial assistance and support and scholarships? Because one of the issues, and we mentioned, the positive trends of Hispanic graduating from high school and entering university. Once they're at university, the issue that we need to address is quote unquote persistence. It's an academic term, and persistence is, are the students actually graduating first and foremost, and are they graduating with a STEM degree? Oftentimes the constraints there are the lack of affordability of college. Hispanic families are hesitant to take out big loans. The financial assistance process is daunting.
For everyone.
For everyone. And so if you're first generation, for example, which Hispanics dominate with first generation students going into university and into college, you may not necessarily have parents that have the knowledge and experience to be able to navigate that. So you have that issue of affordability of college. And then there are, those issues of going away from home, homesick. And that's really where SHPE comes in with their chapters, where we provide that 360 support. We're that familia away from familia. Now, to address the professional and the primary constraints for professionals, and I think this can be said too of students, I'm not going to say complete lack of confidence, but sometimes confidence being shaken because you enter school or you enter a workplace and you may not necessarily see people that look like you.
Exactly.
And you might feel like an outsider. And there's lack of effective mentors and sponsors and role models. And so we've grappled with that. But again, that's where SHPE comes in, and we are that familia, we are that support, we are that network for both students and professionals. You mentioned, credentials and standards and certifications. I think with respect to certifications, certainly, both students and professionals can pursue those certifications. They certainly will help that student and or professional stand out, make them more marketable, make them more, to be able to immediately add value or additional value add once they go into the workplace. SHPE is actually in November going to be providing virtual resources for SHPE members to pursue different types of digital badges and certifications.
Excellent.
We're really excited about it. And this is on top of the fact that our students, our student members and our professional members are either pursuing a STEM degree or have a STEM degree. And this is just to enhance the fact that they're already rock stars, right?
Excellent.
So we're really excited about that.
Let me go back to the chapters. I'm struck by the number of chapters, and I gather the chapters are a variety of types. Could you give us a little sense of it? I hear students. What other chapters do you have?
Sure. SHPE is a little less than 12,000 members. It really depends on where we are in the graduation cycle. But we have student chapters. And when I say student, I'm primarily speaking of university students. So we have 245 chapters total, and that includes our professional chapters. Our professional chapters are chapters that are concentrated in metropolitan areas. And then we also have junior chapters. Our junior chapters are our chapters in high schools.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a 3 tiers of chapters: junior chapters, student chapters, and professional chapters.
And they all are volunteers together.
Well, they're all members,
Mm-hmm.
and many of them volunteer. Our leaders within SHPE are volunteers at the national level, then at the regional level, and then the student level at the student chapter level.
The good news is that you have individuals who could move all the way up through the various age groups and at the same time be actively involved in the association. And I gather the volunteer component is a significant one.
Absolutely. My team at the national level is a small team. Small but mighty, nimble, focused, feisty. That's my team. We cannot effectuate SHPE's mission without our volunteer members,
Mm-hmm.
without our regional leaders. They are an extension of SHPE National. They help us basically execute our strategy through the operations. So we very much appreciate and are beholden to our volunteer leaders and members.
I think it was sometime in the 1830s, a visitor to the United States was struck most by the degree to which Americans formed associations that were composed of volunteers who then proceeded to give enormous amounts of time and energy to causes. So I think that must continue to run.
Absolutely. I've been a member of different types of member associations and professional societies along my entire career. And I can definitively say, hands down, you will not find a more dedicated, passionate, loyal member than a SHPE member. And we say, SHPE for life.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right. We have individuals who have grown up with SHPE, through SHPE, as junior members in high school and are currently executives at major corporations. It's so
And that's a
impressive.
remarkable role model. It has to be a very powerful role model.
Yes, it is. And I oftentimes say SHPE has been doing STEM for 45 years. We've been doing STEM since 1974. We're not doing STEM because it's the new shiny thing and it's what pays. We have changed lives, tens of thousands of lives. It's pretty incredible.
It's amazing.
And I'm so grateful and really honored and privileged to serve in the capacity of the CEO of this organization. It has tremendous potential. And over the last 2 years since I've onboarded as the CEO and with my team, we have been able to stabilize the organization, and not just stabilize it, but to grow exponentially and to break all sorts of records in membership, in attendance, in sponsorship, in social media engagement. We're on fire right now, and I do have a sense of urgency for this organization. We can no longer be the best kept secret.
I want to give you a heads up. At the end of this, I'm struck by the fact that you yourself have a story to tell about not necessarily STEM so much, but your own family and upbringing. So I want to come back to that at the end of the day, but I want to tell a quick personal story and then ask a question. I come from a family. My father was the only one of 13 children to graduate from high school. And, my mother graduated from high school. Neither of them ever attended college. And so when I decided to go off to college, I went off and went to an orientation program and came home and started explaining to my father about credit hours. And my father got very upset. And he said, "You don't need a credit card." And I'm sorry. I said, "What?" And he said, "All this talk about credit cards, you don't need a credit card. You can't afford a credit card." And it took me a while to realize that for my father, the phrase student credit hours had absolutely no meaning whatsoever. And so I think about that often now, because if I was trying to explain to him about being enrolled in 15 credit hours, I might as well have been speaking a foreign language. And so that leads me, in a sense, to talk about something that has always been singled out as a particular attribute of Hispanic families. Anthropologists point to the centrality of the family in Hispanic culture and to the emphases that it brings to respecting authority, the importance of honor and good manners. Now, to the extent those cultural attributes are valid and do in fact reveal themselves in the behavior of Hispanic individuals, are those foundations on which efforts to increase representation in STEM fields and professions, can they be built, or are they already there, or the successes that are built on those foundations that are in the heart, really, in a sense, cultural?
Wow, where do I start? Part of your question, I actually had a visceral reaction, mainly because I hesitate to broad brush an entire group of people.
Exactly.
But at the same time, I even say that for Hispanics, the family is central, or historically, traditionally, is central, and relationships. And what I talk to SHPE members about is that we are well versed in relationship building. The good, the bad, the ugly, and the disastrous that are relationships in our family. How do we translate that into our workplace, into corporate America? Because those are valuable skills.
Yes.
When it comes to, quote unquote, respect for authority, using your words, I would modify that. I think no doubt respect for authority, but I think respect generally. And I think honor for sure, good manners, to the extent that we're equating that to humility, quote unquote humility.
Interesting.
I'm actually inviting SHPE members to look at humility differently. Or at least not defining humility like my parents defined humility. And or at least my perception of how my parents and my aunts and uncles and neighbors, when I was growing up, how they defined or experienced humility. If what you mean by humility is, subservience, nose to the grindstone, not looking up and looking around, and not rocking the boat, not asking questions when they need to be asked, not pushing back when there needs to be some nudging. I don't sign up for that definition of humility. And I'm inviting my SHPE members not to sign up for that either. Now, if you want to talk about ambitious humility and balancing ambitious humility with a healthy dose of confidence, absolutely. I think somebody that's overly confident with a lack of humility is just obnoxious.
Yes.
But, somebody who's confident with a healthy dose of humility, I think it is probably, at least my experience anyway, better received. I think more self-aware, setting him or herself up for success to be able to navigate different types of relationships and different types of workplaces and otherwise. I also am encouraging SHPE members when speaking of confidence, teaching them how to toot their own horn without blowing it. There's actually a book out there about that. I don't think we give ourselves enough credit. And maybe that's part of the whole humility thing. And I've actually come across SHPE members who are like very good at what they do. They're excellent engineers. One of my mentors told me once upon a time that relationships are the currency of the workplace. And I absolutely believe that you can be a darn good engineer or scientist, but it's the relationships that you have that will help, support you and to take you to that next level. And it's not just, and I say this to SHPE members too, it really is about who you know and who knows you, and not so much what you know. Maybe initially, because that gets your foot in the door, but it really is, who do you know and who knows you? Is
Yep.
those individuals, mentors, sponsors, role models, will be there, ideally will be there to help navigate what are oftentimes very complex career pathways.
And you also remind us that it's dangerous to paint, as you say, with broad brushes, any group of people. And we take that to heart. Well,
Well,
please.
but to the extent that folks are going to broad brush us in that way, then I want us to be able to leverage that.
Got
So
it.
if there's this perception out there that Hispanics are about family, absolutely. That's about relationships. Relationships are the currency of the workplace. If you're saying, hey, we're passionate, absolutely. We harness that passion and we get things done. We have a strong work ethic. There's integrity to what we do and how we do it. I think it's taking those broad brush perceptions and perhaps stereotypes and turning them on their head.
Yep.
Just like when an executive called me a feisty Latina, I wasn't sure what to do with that. And now I'm empowered by it. And I'm empowering thousands of other women to own that. So.
Touche.
Yes, yes.
That does, that's a great segue to my question that also was on my mind. And that is Hispanic women. When we talk about the STEM field, is there something that we could learn by understanding better how men and women who have Hispanic ethnic backgrounds, how those two groups themselves navigate the complexity of professions such as science, technology, and medicine? Is there something there that we need to focus on, perhaps give a little extra focus to?
Well, I will say this first and foremost. In my opinion, the future is Latina because of the population numbers and the increase there, the critical mass numbers there. Latinas are entrepreneurs and they are outperforming other ethnic and racial groups when it comes to entrepreneurship. Latina women are using technology faster and better. We are oftentimes breadwinners, sometimes, well, making decisions and what have you. But as far as Latinas in STEM, I think like women in STEM, there are challenges there. We have a lot of heavy lifting to do. Latinas in STEM right now, I think the engineering numbers were only 3%. That's microscopic compared to our population numbers, the workforce numbers. There's some attention that we need to pay to underrepresented, underserved, minority girls in education and ensuring that they have access to STEM-related courses, AP courses, that they have that support, and there are several organizations out there that are doing that. Discovery comes to mind, for example. Really starting earlier in the STEM pipeline with an emphasis on girls and young girls. And then once at the university level, really ensuring that young women and young Hispanic women in particular are not subject to, systemic and pervasive bias and microaggressions by other students and faculty and what have you. As far as the profession itself, certainly I think that a commitment on the part of employers really focusing on women and Latina women in particular, and not just, and it's not just a matter of going and recruiting them, but really committing to supporting them, advancing them, promoting them, acknowledging their contributions. That's really where the rubber hits the road. Is I think organizations are going out and making strides with their recruiting. There's still some opportunities there too on who's recruiting and where they're recruiting and how they're recruiting, but they're doing better. But once the talent is there, the diverse talent, in particular women and Latinas, what is that particular organization doing to really truly support them in their support and advancement within the organization?
I want to be completely unfair in this interview and ask you, if you will, just to share with our listeners something of your own story, because it strikes me that if someone were looking for a role model without putting you on the spot, you sort of shine in that way. Could you tell us a little bit about how you came to be the person you are now?
Wow, that's a fully loaded question.
Yep.
And I will try and answer the mail. I think it starts really with my father, who immigrated with my mother from Mexico. My dad was a migrant farm worker. I learned my work ethic and values like integrity and honesty from both my parents, but really my father indulged my curiosity growing up, and he has always made me feel invincible. That's so important, I think, as a young, as a girl and a young woman trying to make my way through a VUCA world, right? I've had an interesting career in that I was a trial lawyer, and that's arguably male-dominated, aggressive, and along the way, I've been interviewed like this, or I've sat on panels, fireside chats, and I've been asked, have you been harassed? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And I've dealt with that. Have you been discriminated against? Well, not that I'm aware of, until now.
Oh.
And until now, in this role as a CEO in STEM, and it really took me by surprise that at this stage in my career, with this title of CEO, that I would be grappling what I perceive to be, male chauvinism and sexism and gender discrimination. It's disconcerting, but thankfully, with my experience, sort of taking care of myself for a long time and defending clients and zealously advocating for them, and arguably strong communication skills, and being comfortable with who I am and where I'm at, and having that healthy level of confidence, I'm able to tackle those situations head on when I experience them. As far as the young women out there, SHPE members, SHPTinas in particular, what I would advise them is that, to the extent they might not feel comfortable or confident when faced with something like that, that they have in place their own personal board of directors, their inner circle of trusted advisors, mentors, sponsors that they can talk to in order to help navigate that situation. Yeah, the professional societies are aware. I think, because we've had conversations about this at different conferences, and with the whole Me Too, what's going on with Me Too, I'm not going to say phenomenon, the movement. I think people are starting to look up and pay attention, and are starting to go out and seek education and training, and more societies are doing that, but we need to have a sense of urgency about it. We need to put more effective measures in place, but I'm cautiously optimistic.
Ms. Tamez, I can't thank you enough for your thoughts today. And I don't apologize at all for putting you on the spot, because I thought the story you told is a story that I think our listeners need to hear. And I think it serves the point that we started this conversation about, and that is, how do we bend those trend lines? And I think we bend them by starting in very fundamental ways. I want to thank you for being with us on Innovators. You've given us a sense of where we are, where we might go, but you've also given us a sense that there is some urgency attached to this. It's not going to change without somebody pushing. And I'm glad we have you to push for us. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Innovators, a production of Harris Search Associates. We'll have more insightful conversations with global thought leaders to follow.